Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Con John Turk, and this is the Blind Apex Podcast. This episode is going to cover some basics on data systems, and when you should seek professional coaching. Joining me to discuss this topic, longtime racer and coach, some consider the king of VIR, and lover of sailboats, Mr. Peter Krause. How are you, sir?
Con, thank you, and good evening, and thank you for inviting me to the Blind Apex, because what a wonderful name for a podcast. It captures the imagination no matter what track you go to, because they all have the Blind Apex.
There's always one. There is always one, and it's always a challenge, such as my driving career thus far and doing these podcasts. But I met you, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago at VIR. I believe you were a guest instructor for one of my classroom sessions. And then I also worked in the tech shed for NASA Mid-Atlantic. I was chief of tech for a while, and you would come through, bring a car through, we'd get you teched in, so you could participate. But what really made me want to bring you onto the show, and well, other than we had some banter actually earlier today on Facebook, but your virtual track walk with Ross Bentley was probably very instrumental in me picking up time at VIR. Now, your virtual track walk is not car specific. It's making people aware of what they need to pay attention to. I hope you get paid by the view, because I'm pretty sure I watched it at least a dozen times in my rookie year alone. But when I got to walk it for the first time and see what you guys were really talking about, I took notes. I had a track map that I wrote notes down on. I had an adult beverage in my track map when we went walking the track, and it really opened my eyes. And this is actually before I got data. So I really appreciate you being here. Well,
thank you very much.
We try.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I've been so fortunate to be able to turn a passion into a career. And I have always enjoyed my association with Chris Cabetto and NASA Mid-Atlantic. I share a lot of enthusiasm with a lot of people that come to those events. I went to my first Grid Life event this year up at New Jersey and worked with Ross Bentley up there, introducing folks to the Garmin and demonstrating it in their cars. And I was a mechanic, professional mechanic for 25 years. I ran an Italian car repair shop in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I really enjoyed working on cars. I enjoyed understanding cars and driving cars on tracks all throughout North America. And I was able to get to Europe and drive many of the great tracks in Europe. And about 15 years ago, I decided to sell my garage. And when I sold my garage, I was able to, I said, what do you really want to do out of all of the things you've done? And it was to work with drivers one-on-one to help them get better. And I'd had a lot of experience working as a chief instructor for BMW Car Club of America and Ferrari Club of America and Porsche Club of America and BMW Car Club of America Club Racing. And so there was this track day and HPDE background that I had, but there was also a competition background. And honestly, it doesn't really matter whether you're doing HPDE or track days or racing. The perfect lap is the perfect lap, and that's what we're all looking for. And finally, I tried to figure out a way to differentiate the information that I provided other people with the information that other people were giving drivers. And for years and years, it's always been the good old boys club. It's been, well, I do this and it works for me, so you ought to do what I do. And I realized very quickly that there's a million different ways to skin a cat. And you can figure out many different ways through a corner. But if you have faith and belief and have worked out your way through a particular corner, assuming that you're doing some very basic things extremely well, which is like using all the tire, using all the width of the road, unless there's a compelling reason not to, that you can execute at a very high level. And so I started relying on the technology because I'm a geek, and I used to build gaming simulation computers. I was a beta tester for iRacing 15 years ago, and started in that vein because I think simulators are a great way to practice before you get to the track so that you hit the track running. But the data equipment that used to be used was very primitive and didn't really work very well and needed its own dedicated engineer to make it work. And about the time I started doing coaching to club level drivers and HPD drivers in 2007, 2008, 2009, the stuff was getting usable to the point where somebody that didn't know anything about the equipment or anything about data could stick an inexpensive device in their car and measure what they were doing. And I believe that our mind is a very powerful thing. We remember things the way we would like them to be, not as they were. That's not a tattletale. It's not a problem. It just is the way that the brain works. And so when you look at video, just a simple GoPro video with no information on the background of you driving around VIR or Summit Point. Summit Point, Maine is one of my favorite tracks. It was one of the first tracks I ever drove on in the early 80s. And I've won a lot of races there. I've really enjoyed it. I love that place, and they've made some big improvements recently. But when you look at a video with no information on it, 85 to 90% of the video looks exactly as you remember. But 10 to 15% oftentimes doesn't look like the way you remember. I missed that apex. I thought I turned in later. And if you pay attention to those things and bring your hyper focus, your laser focus to those areas that you're driving differently than you remember, you can go faster. And you doesn't even take data to do it. But I wanted something objective, something not subjective. I didn't want my opinion to get in the way of a driver progressing. I wanted to make it more collaborative, where we could sit down together and I would work with a driver, and we would meet before and after each session, and we would send them out with a very specific, no more than 2 objectives for that particular session. Like that, the first session is typically, I want you to touch every inside curve, and I want you to accelerate all the way to the point where you decide to brake. And that stuff sounds super simple, but man, is it hard for even drivers at the highest level to do. Anyway, that's a big intro, but I'll quit.
Well, so I'm absolutely guilty of not accelerating to the point I want to brake. And that's a freebie, man. That is free time if you can sort of integrate that into the natural thing you do. So a little bit of my background is I do data every day. I'm a data analyst, program manager. All I do with is thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of data every day. I chart it. I find my discrepancies, my deltas. I find the cause. I send it up to decision makers. But I didn't actually use data actually use the data. I had an AIM solo. Oh, well, okay, so first I had my cell phone in the dash, and then I bought an AIM solo, and I never
Now the
used the
cell
data
phone, was
off of
that like
either one.
Ray's?
Yeah, Harry's lap
Was the,
timer,
the
I
phone like
believe.
Ray's Chrono or Harry's?
Yeah, I was using Harry's.
Uh-huh.
So
I mean, Harry's is great, and Ray's Chrono is great. And
yeah,
that's how a lot of people start.
yeah, so all I literally did was use it as a lap timer. And it's weird because I've been doing data for so long. Why would I have this tool and not start using it? Fast forward now, I'm 2.5, 3, 4 years into this racing thing, and I kick myself for actually not using data earlier. So when do you think
Well,
people should start using it?
you shouldn't be so hard on yourself, and we don't want to guilt people into using it, and fully immersing it in it without the proper context. I think it's super important. You know how important data is. You see trends that become apparent in the information that you're looking at every day. And honestly, that's what I ask people to do when they look at their driving data is don't don't get fixated on looking at a particular measure. Look at your information, look at a few measures all the time to the point where you can begin to identify trends. And so much of it is visual. Most of the people that I work with are visual learners, and they would describe themselves as that. And if we do a speed versus distance graph, where the vertical axis is speed and left to right is distance, you see the line go up as the car accelerates, and you see the line go down sharply if you're braking hard, and less sharply, a lot less sharply, if you're lifting off and coasting. And so by looking and equating simple shapes, you can all of a sudden begin to put the pieces together and lay that foundation that you have now done to move towards more advanced techniques. But you got to start somewhere. And I know, I hate to say this, but I sold $6 million worth of AIM, Video V-Box, Motec, Garmin catalysts in the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And I sold my equipment business last year to go back to coaching because that's what I really enjoy. The equipment business was getting so popular. It was taking over my life, and I'd rather work with people than ship off boxes. But the thing about it is that this equipment has never been easier to use. And breakthrough devices like the Garmin Catalyst, and I think this was something that sparked our conversation today on Facebook, was you want the data to help lead you in the right direction. Because right now, an AIM device will splash all this information in front of you in any one of hundreds of different ways, of customizable ways to display that information. But if you don't know what you're looking for, it's very confusing and very intimidating, and it's still a problem. It's still a problem. The Motec, the V-Box to a lesser extent, the AIM, being Italian, and I love the Italians, but they don't think linearly. And I laugh when I say that because I worked on Italian cars for 25 years, and I love Italian cars. Form over function, we call it. And but now you have devices like the Garmin, which is not the be all and end all, but a great way for people to get into it and have an AI component, an algorithm that brings everything together and says, you know what, you are faster when you apex earlier. Well, what instructor ever said that? But coaches say it all the time.
I can tell you none of
So
my instructors said it.
none of your instructors said apex earlier, or you're
No,
faster when you apex.
everything was a late apex.
Yep. Yep. And
To
what
be
you
honest,
would
the
do
late
you would
apex is the
drive in-
safest way. Is the safest way around the course.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm not suggesting that anybody not start with a late apex. The way to start safely is to turn in late, apex late, and straighten the exit. But I think a lot of people get into ruts. And what they do is they do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And what they need to do is they need to look at that information and look at what they're doing. And here in this case with the Catalyst, it will identify your best individual performances through several corners and through a few segments or portions of the racetrack. And it will say you were faster when you apexed later, or you were faster when you apexed earlier, or you were faster when your apex area was longer. I mean, that's what's wonderful about this whole thing. I mean, we drive around in circles all the time, and we're trying to do better, but we kind of need to know what works and what doesn't. And our butt is not always well calibrated, and our mind isn't always accurate in our memory. You know, if you downshift to second gear at your favorite corner, Oak Tree, you may feel like that's a better way through because you feel this big push at your back blasting you down the back straightaway. But if you get the line right and you roll speed in and you get the car on the edge to the point where it begins to rotate or develop more of a slip at the back than at the front, i.e. pointing further down the track before you reach the apex, then you sometimes can roll third gear through. And even though it doesn't feel faster, you're spending a great deal less time, not only in that corner, but you're no slower coming out. As a matter of fact, you may be quicker.
Yeah, I've actually really been working on Oak Tree and my apex speed, just trying to keep it as high as possible. I'm still working on the car, but there's always a driver improvement there. You talked a lot about the Garmin.
Is. That's a tough place.
Yeah. You talked a lot about the Garmin. That's actually what I personally use. And for somebody who sits in front of, 4 screens, 5 if you count the laptop every day, and looks at data, the AIM system, like you referenced earlier, it will give you a tsunami's worth of data. It's just, it's so much that I don't think the average person, especially if they're still in HPDE, is going to want to download after every session and review it after every session.
That's right. That's exactly right. Because often in HPDEs, especially in a busy schedule like Grid Life and NASA, Mid-Atlantic, very often there's not enough time. If you're an instructor and you're working with students, or if you're trying to work on your car and do all the things you need to do between sessions, it's not physically possible to take the amount of time to go through the information between every session in any sort of depth. But I think that there are 2 aspects that every driver can use no matter what data system they have as long as they have a display in the car while they're on track. And at the end of the day, at least, just for half an hour, 40 minutes. I will say that video is super, super important. So for those people with an Apex Pro, or which I think is a wonderful device to calibrate your butt, and we can talk more about the differences in all these systems as we get on, the pros and cons. But I made it a point of selling and being facile with every piece of decent entry-level budget club level hardware that was available, because I knew that different strokes for different folks. There are a lot of drivers that find it difficult to get up to the edge of adhesion because they're afraid and they're anxious. They're not afraid. They're anxious that the car is going to suddenly do something and slide and slip, and they're going to make a mistake, and they're going to go off the track and do damage. And so they need a tool to help them gradually build up utilizing all the capability, the grip of the car. And that's one of the things that the Apex Pro does with its LED lights. And also it's AI. Also it is the only other device besides the Garmin that has an AI component, which is a learning component. I use that as AI is a very broad term, but a learning component is very specific. Every driver, no matter whether they are novice HPDE or time trial winners or national champions in club racing or entry-level pro or high-level pro, every driver, there is no driver out there that is so consistent that they are doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same point on every lap at a particular circuit.
Okay, so now I have a question.
Okay.
All right. So Garmin has the variance measure. And I see on the internet all these guys and gals, all these folks they're in like the 3% variation range of their whatever. I'm not even sure what it is exactly. I don't know whether it's the consistency of line, the consistency of break points, lap times, speed, all that. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm an outlier because my worst variation is like a 0.7%, but I'm usually in a 0.0 something percent.
Okay. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the variance.
So, yes, because I believe it actually is a weakness, but I want to hear the variance part for those people with Garmin.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So I think a lot of people say, well, I've done a 210.7 at VIR. I'm working with a guy right now doing a remote analysis. He lives in New York, drives a Porsche. He sent me data and video, and he said, well, I've done a 210.7 at VIR.
That's Honda
the first
time.
The first thing that popped out to me was you did one 210.7. All your other laps are 11s, 12s, 13s, and 14s. I said, you did one outlier. So for you to do better than a 210, you got to do a bunch of 210s first. And it took me a long time as a professional. It took me a long time to wrap my head around the different way that the Garmin was using the consistency primarily of lap times, but also of segment times. And one of those things was that the driver is, like you are doing a great job being very consistent in your performance. The only downside of that is that it is possible for you to be driving to your own limit, your own set level. And you may be bumping up against that limit without realizing it. So that is something to think about. But I think that you are on the right path, because you've already recognized the fact that you're getting a consistent level of performance, which is important. Your friends may not necessarily be getting that, but you have also optimized your laps. Now it's time for you to start digging a little bit deeper and say, okay, am I generating as much force laterally as I am when I touch the brake? Because you should be able to do that. Now, there's not a lot of books or anything that are going to tell you, well, looking at the friction circle, which is a graphic representation of how much force is acting on a car as it brakes in a straight line or accelerates in a straight line or shifts to the left as you turn to the right and vice versa. But it is important that you pick one or two things to look at. And one of those things is the G loadings or the forces acting on the car at any given point. And the Garmin does that. And the Apex Pro does that. And the AIM does that. And that's what's really remarkable is all of these devices measure roughly the same thing with roughly the same accuracy. And it's just a question of how deep you want to go. I still think that the Garmin sort of cuts to the chase really quickly. And that is helpful at a busy DE for sure.
Yeah. My reason for actually going to the Garmin had nothing to do with ease of use. I was content with my AIM. I would come home, download everything, find, 2 or 3 corners or 2 or 3 areas I needed to work on by going over the data, and I'd go back for the next weekend to race, right? But we had a requirement that said your camera has to work all the time, basically, while we're racing. And I can't tell you how many GoPros I've thrown after putting it into record mode and it defaults. I don't know whether it's like race car vibration. I don't know what it's doing, but it goes into like 7 picture burst mode where it just does that for the entire 40-minute race. And then you go to download so you can look at the video to see, okay, on this lap, I had a really good, one of my biggest problems with the AIM is you're not guessing, but you have to really know where your corners are and you have to figure that out. And then you can look at your video and see where by accident, I went with the Garmin just to make sure I had a good, consistent picture. And it was cheaper than the AIM Smarty Cam. Well, the same price as the camera from AIM, but I got the tablet. And then I started digging into the tablet and it was pretty good. The basic stuff is speed over time and all that jazz. And I know a lot of people don't use it because I see them on the forums, I see them on Facebook, but they can toggle out of speed. They can go to other vectors, and it can get you pretty granular, not like AIM. And one of the big things I feel that helps AIM, Motec, even Haltech has some stuff, is its measurables of the car. So one of my things with AIM is when the driver is pretty peak, looking for tenths, not full seconds, you can start to put sensors or data log certain things on the car that will help you adjust the car, and then you'll have to readjust as the driver. So you get it's more of a complete package. But that's pretty advanced. It's not for
It
the
is pretty advanced, and you can get pretty far before that's needed.
right. I believe
For
that
sure.
is true. I know how I want my car to feel, and I need to
Mhm.
work on my driving. So as long as the car doesn't feel the way I want, I'll keep messing with it to make it feel that way while I continually work on
Mhm.
myself as the driver. I'm really interested in
Well,
the
I think
Apex Pro
you're.
part that you talked about because of the I am
Uh-huh.
one. I I don't know if I would describe myself as being afraid of the edge of adhesion, but I feel like when I find it, the car is way too far off. It's gone. Like when
Right.
I
Right.
spin wildly,
Yes.
generally speaking, when so I take, a very large step when I try to test my traction
Yep.
versus a very small step. So my car is always all my
Right.
cars. I'm 4 years into racing. I'm on my second race car. It's a long story, but in both cars,
Oops.
well, I didn't total it. It just wore out. It was a 20-year-old race car and it had frame rail
Well, that's
failure
good.
eventually. And I didn't hit anything
Oh
with
my
it, so
goodness.
it just happened. But um,
It's
in
just
both
fatigue.
cars,
Oh boy.
it's just it's very neutral, but I cannot, even in a front wheel drive car, I couldn't get my car to really rotate even when I abruptly come off throttle. They were just stuck.
Hmm.
So to
Right.
me, it feels like I'm either not pushing the edge of adhesion enough or the car's not quite set up correctly. Now, when I have tried to go a little faster, what happens is either I need to roll out of the throttle because I'm pushing the front off the car. So that makes me feel like it's
Hmm.
more of a setup issue, not a speed issue. But also, I've only
Agreed.
spun I've only spun a couple of times and it's always on cold tires. So I'm always trying to
Right.
be aggressive out of the gate. It's a requirement when you race.
So you know why you won.
I know why I spun. So, but I'm interested because you said that the Apex Pro sort of the lights, does it actually, so I always thought the lights were like the lights on your aim solo where it's like, yeah, you're doing a good job. You're green. But
Oh no. See,
no?
that's what's really, really good is
Okay.
the lights on the aim solo are time based. So it's really about calculating how much time it takes. So this gets back to what we talked about before, which was most any data system has a lap time display, but it also has a predictive lap display, which is how much ahead or behind you are of your previous best lap, and that can be the lap. The previous best can be that session, or a lap set by somebody else, or a lap in that you have done that was your personal best. But you're being graded constantly against your best. It's like driving in a video game against a ghost car, and you are if you're ahead of that, if your ghost is ahead of your actual car, you're behind.
Right.
If your ghost is behind you, you are ahead or minus in comparison to the reference lap. And and so all these, when I it doesn't matter when I talk to somebody in an advanced solo student in driver's education, like a HPDE 4 in NASA, or a time trials person, or a club racer. Very often they will use that predictive lap time as a carrot. And if it is a minus number halfway through the session, they'll be like, wow, I am making big progress and I'm gonna get there. But the cool thing is with the Apex Pro in particular is the Apex Pro is all about generating forces and generating G's, making sure that you are carrying a lot of G's, but not so suddenly that it causes a loss of traction. And the Apex Pro does that. An Apex Pro, instead of measuring the amount of time it takes you to get through a particular part of the track, what it does is it measures the amount of demonstrated grip that you use. And this is something that not a lot of people think about. They don't realize that some drivers are capable of isolated moments of brilliance, that they're able to get through turn 1 at VIR or turn 3 Wagon Bend at Summit Point, or, Watkins Glen, anywhere. Sometimes they can do it really, really well. And they're just managing the amount of total grip that they use from the end of braking, or actually from the beginning of braking, all the way through braking in a straight line, rolling into the corner, picking up a lot of lateral loading as you go around the corner. And then as the wheel straightens up and you're driving straight out and accelerating hard, then all of a sudden the LEDs of this Apex Pro, which is really a cool device, it's got its own little GPS antenna in it. It has a memory of all the tracks, all the start-finish lines, and it's a really cool tool. It's not expensive, and there are a lot of people that really enjoy it and use it a lot. There are some modifications that you can add that allow you to use an iPhone or an Android device as a video camera with synced data that it will render immediately. And so the Apex Pro builds over the course of 3 laps a memory of what you did through there, and then it measures if you, for instance, overslow for the next corner. That can often pop up as, I'm not using as much of the grip as I have before. And so I need to push harder. And that will show up on this LED lineup, which is on the Apex Pro, or in a phone that is paired with the Apex Pro. It's fairly inexpensive. It's, I think, about $650. It does help if you want to add video to it, to use a subscription that allows you to use your phone and a mount on the inside of the window. But it's very inexpensive and very powerful for what it does. And a group of students at Auburn University down in Birmingham, Alabama, put this thing together and built this device in 2015, 2016. And they've done a really, really good job of putting this thing together. And a fair number of people use it because it's inexpensive and it's very effective, and it helps people understand how close to the edge they are, and makes them feel better about the fact that they can push in certain places, but they shouldn't push in other places. And that really helps.
Yeah, I think it's overlooked a lot. I know I overlooked it. I didn't understand, maybe when I was looking, it was 2018, I believe. I'm not sure the phone app edition was there yet. I thought it was still.
It may not have been.
I think it was still you had to do the download thing. And I was really not looking forward to doing the download from either device.
No, I understand completely.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, but I actually enjoy the Garmin just because I can get out of the car, take my suit off, get my water, then I just go back, pull the tablet, sit down, and start looking at its recommendations, looking at my lap times, those types of things. getting back a little bit to the variance, I knew it was a problem. My variance and the lack of variation in my times or whatever was going on was in my last race at VIR. It was I was racing with a couple of the guys who were pretty close. One was behind me, one was in front of me, and I could never really reel them in. And it's because I knew I wasn't doing this. I wasn't trying something new. I wasn't taking the car another, car length deeper in a braking zone, trying to close things up. I wasn't lifting off the brakes a little earlier to try to pull more time. I was just slamming my laps, lap after lap after lap, and hoping that he was going to make a mistake, which he never did. And
that's cool.
I believe the data shows that through the variance, because I get into those situations and I'm not pushing, and I come back and I look at my data and my variation is very low. So I assume that's sort of what it's telling me, is that I'm not going crazy.
And that's exactly what it's telling you. I tell people that what it's telling them is that they are driving to a comfort level. And they are doing the same thing over and over again very well. And so you've hit the nail on the head. But I would say that you can't expect to consistently improve or improve without a Hail Mary until you do achieve a high level of consistency. I mean, it took me a long time to get my head around the idea that the optimal lap, which is the construction of all your best individual segments or pieces of a lap that the Garmin stitches together and can play as one continuous video, I couldn't understand why that was always compared to the average lap. Until I sat down with Adam, who was the project lead for Garmin, putting the catalyst together. And he said, look, you have got to, he said, every data analyst, racing data analyst, is just like you. You look at a driver's best lap. You don't look at a driver's average performance, and you wonder why it's hard for them to get better. Well, you've really got to assemble a very tight group of reasonably quick laps and then determine where to go from there. And that's what I really, really like about the Garmin, especially. That's a really handy tool.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a 1.7 second variance from my actual best lap to my optimal lap, but I believe that's due to me running very consistently, but also fighting through traffic in a race group or even an HPD group. When you're going through traffic, if your lap times are staying consistent, but one lap you're, say you run a 2:13 at VIR, one lap you do a 2:13 with no traffic, and the next lap you do a 2:13 with traffic. That 2:13 with traffic, you did something different because you're inherently working offline. You're inherently probably being slowed down. There's at least a mental check just to make sure that driver sees you, pointed, didn't point, depending on what group you're in. So there is that slight hesitation, and those slight hesitations, depending on where they are on the track and depending on the track, can cost you full second easily. So
that's a great observation.
Yeah, so I think people need to understand that when they look at it, they need to look at it, if they're optimal and their best are exactly the same, they're kind of playing in clean air, I think.
That's right. Yes.
But when your best lap and your optimal are still far away, there's still things you can do to definitely improve. So,
no question. No question. And that's why it's so fun to talk to you about trying new things. Because that's how people get better, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely need to work on that. I know I want to free up my car, get a little looser, but I need to push myself a little. Crazy story. We were doing a test day. A bunch of us get together. It's a NASA Mid-Atlantic HPDE only. Some of the racers invade, the advanced HPDE group, and we do our final testing. We burn down the last R comps of the season. And I was at Summit Point. I'm coming around Summit Point, and I go to brake for turn 1, and I blow the balance line on the caliper, the bridge line on the caliper, going into turn 1. But magically, I still slowed down for turn 1. I braked at the same exact spot I brake every single time, but I blew a caliper, still slowed down enough to turn into turn 1 safely. And then
that means there's more.
that absolutely. But my data actually didn't show that. My data did show that I need to work on a squeeze and not a stomp, because I'm really good at stomping on the brake, not squeezing. So it shows that, but it didn't show that I could shrink it more. And it's sort of, I don't know, it's counterintuitive, because I'm in a heavier car, bigger car, McPherson strut car, and the only advantage might be the size of my brakes and the size of my wheels and tires. But it showed me. I mean, I was upset. It was only the third session of the day, first day out, testing these brakes, by the way. But it showed me, there's way more left in the brakes, and I really need to concentrate on that. So that's one of my big things for 2023. I just need to figure out how I'm going to measure it better. But
well, and so there's the next question. I mean, the problem with something that doesn't measure, say, brake pressure, which is the next step. And you'd already alluded to this before. You said, that past a certain point, there's only a finite amount of information you can get from something that doesn't have a connection from the car. And now, especially in more modern cars, you can get throttle position, and you can get braking, and you can get braking and acceleration. You can get gear selection. You can get to a number of things that allow you to put together how long it takes to slow down to a particular speed. Like, it's really hard to ask people to push going into a corner. That's the most dangerous part of going faster, is not going through the apex or out of a corner. That is the hardest part, is rolling a little bit more speed in a slower corner. And you just have to do it gradually, incrementally, one step at a time.
That actually was what I worked on in 2022, was
excellent.
Get off the brake earlier, roll more speed in. It wasn't for there's no sole purpose to get into the gas faster, but to carry more speed to the point where I started apply the gas the same way and see what happens. And it reaped benefits. But I could sort of see that in the data. So I knew that needed to happen.
Right.
It's this.
You had said something earlier to me that was very interesting, and that was you would talk to me a little bit about trying to raise your entry speed, raise your apex speed a little bit. Raise that minimum speed just a little bit is another thing that you were working on. And you also had said sometimes it's tough because you are sometimes overpowering the front tires. Is your car a front drive car?
Yep. Yeah, everything goes through the front. I think I could put rears on
So,
and leave them
so
there
the
for a
front
decade.
tire contact patch is doing all the work.
All of it.
And that's why when you say to me, I want to work to free the car up, honestly, that's going to be the most important thing you do this year. And part of that is because I think a lot of drivers say, well, I'm going to drive better and it's fundamentally going to change the balance of the way the car works. And that is true up to a particular point. But you want to induce rotation. Do want the rear of the car to become unstuck as a planned operation and result of the timing and amplitude of your control inputs. So this idea of rolling a little bit more speed after the brake zone into the corner, you still need to have some brake application because we want to bias that weight towards the front of the car. But then we also want to have it set up so that there's still that bias towards the front tires as you approach the apex and turn the wheel so that the car pivots on that outside front tire. And the first time that thing steps out, it can be really disconcerting. But as you get more comfortable doing it, by practicing first at slow corners, like turn 5 at Summit Point is a perfect example. You get through the chute. You're not worried about going fast down through turn 4. You're worried about accelerating long enough so that you have to carry the brakes past the point where you begin to turn left into the carousel. And what that does is that makes that outside front tire contact patch the center of the axis for rotating the car around. And you should not only see this in the video, but you can see this in the data. And to make sure that you're doing it right, you want to make sure that there is, so combined G. I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, I promise. But what the Apex Pro does, and to a certain extent what the Catalyst does, and what the AIM will do once you set it up to show this, is the AIM will show you a colored map of your path around the track, and the color differentiation is how much in amplitude, how much force is acting on the car at any given point all the way around the track. And what most people do is they have a lot of energy acting on the car when they hit the brakes in a straight line. But when they end up slowing up too soon, they release the brake pedal prematurely and let the car roll into the corner. And what that does is that doesn't really put a lot of stress on the tires. But then when they add the steering input, the car just wants to go straight. It understeers. And so if they were able to slow their brake release so that they had a little bit more energy going into the corner and bias that weight on the outside front tire, you would see very little drop off of what is called G sum. And that would tell you, this is something that could tell you in 20 seconds whether you are braking too early, releasing too early, accelerating, God forbid, and then turning into the corner in a front drive car that is, when you accelerate, lifting weight off the front tires that are trying to turn and pull you out. and putting a lot of weight on the back, which causes the rear tires to stick, when in those are in fact the tires you want to step out and have the car do the work when it turns. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. I have to apply that in my life. It's what I'm trying, I promise. But yeah, I understand.
That's good.
You just have to apply it.
Good.
You stated something earlier just before. You said about getting the car under control and the lap times is I just need to drive better. And I think personally, when I get to the point where I'm like, I just need to drive better, and I don't have a goal for a corner, a goal for a brake zone, a goal for something tangible, something measurable. I can't say to myself, I'm going to go out and drive better for this session, this race, whatever. I believe that's a point where I either need to reevaluate how I'm looking at data or have someone new like you as a professional look at my data. Because I think if I'm so generic like that I need help or I need to reevaluate things. When do you think people need to start seeking professional coaching?
Well, I think professional coaching is it was funny because when I started doing this, especially on a club level 15 years ago, 16 years ago, it was not a thing. And people asking other people for advice on how to drive, even instructors asking other HPDE instructors, was not that common. I mean, yes, they would talk about it over beers at the end of the day or dinner, but there was not a real serious study over it. And when I started doing this career change where I was going to work full-time, one-on-one with HPDE drivers and club racers and time trialers to help them unlock the performance that I knew that was in them and that they knew it was in them but didn't know how to access, my best friend turned to me and he said, how in the hell are you going to make a living out of something that people give away for free? And I said, and he was referencing the whole idea of volunteer instruction for MARC clubs and for organizations and clubs. And let me tell you, the salt of the earth, the best people in the paddock are the people that give up their time and sit right seat with HPDE students to help them build the foundations they need to grow. But when I started this business, I thought it was going to be mostly newbies, mostly people who were just starting out, students, and I was completely wrong. It was mostly advanced solo and instructors who called me. And what they did was they said, I'm stuck. I've tried this, I've tried that. I don't really have a very well-defined plan. I don't really know what I'm trying to do here. I need some help. And so I would say that so just to finish this up, my business took off the year that Tiger Woods was interviewed after he had won the Masters for I don't know how many times in 2009. And in an interview with USA Today, somebody stuffed a microphone in his face and interviewed him. And it was played on ESPN, all the shows. And he said, I have a coach. And people said, wait a minute, you are the greatest golfer in the world and you have a coach. What is that all about? And who's your coach? They have to be better than you. No, it's my caddy. And what we talk about is we talk about solving problems. And I will tell you that the best coaches, especially in the driving arena, are people who are collaborative, who work together with their client and with the driver to sit down and together come up with a detailed incremental plan to move forward. So I would say that a driver knows it's time perhaps to work with a professional coach when they have exhausted the ideas that they've gotten from their colleagues and peers and friends in the paddock. And when they are looking to craft a methodology that helps move them forward. So typically myself and other people that I know who I think are very good, not only work with the driver and provide them with benchmarks. And benchmarks are the numbers I think you should be doing in your car. And the only reason I know that is I have 18 terabytes of information from every kind of different car, every kind of different drive layout, every kind of different tire, every kind of different engine swap, every kind of different layout and driver experience level. And I share with the people that I work with the practices that work the very best at the highest level of driving. So by that, I mean the speed trace in your Garmin should, even though the numbers may not be the same, look very similar to an IMSA winner in a TCR car, a front drive 2-liter car with slicks. Yes, there's a difference there. But the point is the way that people make those cars go around the track most efficiently looks a particular way on the data. And if I can sit there and say, look, you should look at your speed versus distance after every session. And the first thing you should make sure is that every full throttle acceleration should end in a sawtooth. So that full throttle acceleration causes the speed to go up. And then there should be very little, if any, time between that full throttle and the application of brake, causing a sharp peak and then a decline.
Can we lower the bar for me? Can I be like a TCA car? Not quite a TCR car.
Hey man, so one of the fun things and one of the coolest things in grid life is the Sunday Cup to me. And
oh
I
no.
have an affinity for little cars. I love little cars.
All right. I have a hard time with them, but go ahead.
I understand everybody has a hard time with them because they trip over them. But
yeah,
if
there's a hierarchy
of Cup car
there's a hierarchy of autocross to time trial to wheel, and I feel personally, even for normal time trialers, and I'm about to alienate some folks, and that's okay. They've been alienated before. I feel like the Sunday Cup guys, even for time trialers, have a larger than average ego in thinking that Sunday Cup is the pinnacle of motorsports. At least that's the perception that you can see. I mean, I know it's just social media and things like that, but every time I see a Sunday Cup car, I'm like, oh no, not another one. And then in the craze build them.
That's right. So yeah. No, I hear you. And my particular experiences with B-Spec in SCCA, which is similar, basically standard Mini Coopers, not JC Coopers, not the supercharged
I
car.
believe B-Spec was the race version of Sunday Cup. Sunday Cup is the street version of B-Spec.
You're right. You're right. And I can tell you that in SCCA at the national championships runoffs, B-Spec is a war. out there. And the drivers that run it, some of the drivers that run it have been racing at very high level for decades. And I mean, I've got guys in a box stock fit with R7 Hoosiers doing 223s at VIR. And that doesn't sound like a very fast time, but in one of those cars, that is on the edge of disaster all the way around the lap.
My wife and I have a daily driver Honda Fit, and I believe to do a 223 in that car, it has the thing for being in like a beam rear end and all that stuff. For whatever reason, it handles great, but
it does.
It's death getting onto the highway. So I can't imagine trying to actually accelerate up the uphill S's, pull myself out of hog pen.
Oh my God.
And God forbid they do North Course where at VIR where you have, instead of going up the S's, you have to turn right and go up a legitimate hill. They would never get up there. The race would be over. But yeah, they would just spin up and the clutch may burn out trying to get up that hill. It's just, they're so slow. Well, maybe I shouldn't have used power. It's a great example. I understand where you're going, because to drive a slow car fast it takes a lot of work from the driver. Case in point, my car, one race weekend, there was a short in the wiring harness and I lost VTEC. So my 2,800 pound car, instead of having 200 horsepower, was down to 155. We only measured that later on the dyno. I didn't know, but I said, if it's not blowing up and it's not throwing a check engine light, I'm going to stay out here because I need to optimize corner speed. I need to work on letting go of the brake and getting to the apex better. And then none of that has to do with not having horsepower, right? Because my goal was to work on that. That
was really smart.
And so I stayed out there.
That was a really good idea.
I beat the bush. I looked at my data and I was like, well, you know what? I'm doing really good segment. I actually knew right away because my new historical proposed best lap came because I improved so much on my corner and exit speed of turn 1 at VIR, and then how I was trying to run crazy through NASCAR, that my overall best lap, predicted best lap, lowered, even though I had no horsepower. I was like, how did this happen? So I went on the search. I went digging through my data, and I was like, it's segment 1. I picked up a ton of time in segment 1. I didn't need horsepower to find time in segment 1. Then when I had that solution, that problem fixed, segment 1 came off of my segments to worry about, and I picked up a lot more time. So, see,
that's the other thing that's really cool about this is you found time in segment 1, but once you were able to do that, you were able to sort of do that again and put that to bed and go to the next segment. And I was just going to say that, the additional benefits of seeking a pro coach would not necessarily be confined to that particular track, but instead the overview of a methodology on how to do that many different ways. Under braking, in the transition from acceleration to braking. You talked earlier tonight about that you had to be careful about striking the brake from full throttle because it would upset the platform, that you needed to squeeze on the brake. And you talked about rolling speed into the corners. And the last thing was that not only does the pro coach help you with, are you pulling lateral G when the car is flat and level at every max corner? Are you pulling maximum G longitudinally and evenly throughout the longer break zones, going into turn 1 at the end of the back straight at VIR. Perfect example. Now, there are environmental factors like an uphill at the end of the back straight, which causes the car to compress into that hill and can increase the forces acting on the car so that it will slow up to 20 to 25% quicker than it would if it was on a flat level surface. But there are places that you can transfer and look at the way you do things in a particular area at VIR could transfer to Summit, like turn 1 at VIR versus turn 1 at Summit is always a good favorite of mine. And then the last big benefit, additional benefit of hiring a professional coach is to help you streamline your data analysis, to help you put together profiles. If you're using AIM, it is completely customizable how you display the information. And the way that it might make sense to you is different than the way it might make sense to a buddy of yours who's paddock next door to you at a time trial. And so to sit down with a professional coach, especially one that should be facile and familiar with all of these devices, and particularly the higher level coaches in AIM, because it is got such good penetration. If you run AIM, I would encourage you to get a brake pressure sensor on your car and get an AIM logger like a small Evo 4S or something relatively inexpensive, or an MXM, which is not that expensive, not much more expensive than a Solo, that would allow you to measure and see throttle application. When you start applying throttle, are you continuously pressing down, or are you getting stuck in the middle, or heaven forbid lifting off as you're applying the throttle? When you hit the brake, is your brake pressure high at the leading edge of braking rather than pushing into the brake and having maximum pressure too deep in the braking zone, which would cause the car to be upset at corner entry? So not only does the Pro Coach help with individual tune-ups on car placement and the best execution fundamental skills, but they're also going to help streamline the data analysis so that you will be able to take something that used to take you 30 minutes and turn it into a 5 or 10 minute operation.
Yeah. You said, oh, you can get your AIM open, or open up your data in AIM, and you can get a colored track map, and it'll tell you your G loads and all that stuff. Yeah. And you said 20 seconds. I searched for over 20 minutes and had to default to going to YouTube to figure out how to actually get it to pull up. So you can learn.
And that's the sad thing.
Yeah,
that's the sad thing about AIM.
That's the hard part with AIM. It really is. Once you get familiar with it, I'm with you. If you own one right now, or you're looking at it and you want to get serious, I don't know if they have classes. I know they have tutorials online. Start taking them to make your life easier when you go to pull your data. Work with a pro when you get to a certain level, because they'll be able to actually show you certain ways to dice it that you probably never diced it before. I work with data every day. I know guys I work with, they can make a pivot table out of an Excel spreadsheet, right? But when they ask a certain question, they don't know how to display it. And I think that's something that the professionals will know. You would know a different way or a different perspective. Maybe it will help me learn. Maybe it will open my eyes to something else. Maybe it'll just prove a point, but you'll know the different ways how to manipulate it to get it to look in an acceptable manner for whoever your client is.
And
even Motec can do that, right? I think. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Motec is actually almost a little easier.
Is it? Okay. Well, I don't plan on using Motec, but every different chassis. This is not a Honda specific podcast. I race a Honda. I race with Honda Challenge. I race with NASA. Okay, I'm not trying to be specific to those groups. I have plenty of folks that listen that are doing Spec Miata or STL or other classes. And so they all have these different options. But I think what it comes down to is they need to seek help once they run out of their own ability to assess it. And I think you said that with this new technology, it's easier and easier. But I'm getting to the point where, as a data analyst, I've maxed the capability of the Garmin, right? Or I will be shortly. When I actually want to do AIM, mostly because I'm a little bougie and I want to get an AIM PDM set up, get their dash installed, because you basically get a free dash when you buy the PDM. Get all that installed.
And the PDM is the PDM is an awesome device. I mean, with the 10-inch dash, it is crazy good.
Yeah.
But it is a grade A. It's a lot of work to set it up well. And so it's important to work with a dealer who will help you get it set up. A lot of this stuff, when you get it set up right, you can leave it. You can leave it. You don't need to play with it. But then, so there's two ways to do. There's two variables. You've got the configuration of the device, and then you have the configuration of the software to display the information. And I can tell you that driver control inputs, things like steering angle, how much you turn the wheel, how fast you turn the wheel, brake pressure, which is how much you push the pedal and release the pedal and how quickly you do it, throttle pedal. Those three things from a driver perspective are huge. Engine RPM. People have questions about gear selection all the time. Should I be in this gear or should I be in that gear? And the first thing they should look at is a speed versus distance graph to say, what corners are the same speed? Well, it turns out that at VIR, there are 4 corners that are basically between 48 and 54 miles an hour in most cars. And that's turn 1, turn 4, turn 12.
Okay. Oak tree.
Turn 12 and turn 14, which is the right going down into roller coaster.
Okay. I see that.
So if you are going through those corners at the same speed, then you ought to be in the same gear.
I had to do that actually for Summit Point. For Summit Point, if you look at it, turn 10 is the right-hander onto the straightaway. Yep. Turn 3, it is uphill, so the speed trace through the corner is a little bit different. But the angle of attack, the pitch of the corner is the same, so your entry needs to be the same. And when I realized that, because I was overslowing for turn 3 at Summit Point so badly, but when I realized that, when I looked at it in that manner, it was night and day for me. Now turn 3 is great. So
you hit the nail on the head of a piece of advice that I give to people at Summit all the time. I say, look at the minimum speed at 3 and 10, and whichever is lower needs work. And like you said, it shouldn't be much lower at 3 than it is at 10.
If anything, you might be able to come in a little faster because you know the turn uphill, and because they repave the curving shot that you'll take at 3 versus what you roll over in 10 will slow you down as you're still compressed. But that's really detailed and probably not advice everybody needs to hear, but okay, it's out there for right now. Because it doesn't apply to every
cool.
chassis, and it doesn't apply to everybody's skill level. So, but yeah, you definitely need to look at those two corners. And I think that's something else. That's the difference, I believe, between the heroes that sit in the right seat and give you instruction in the track. They understand your skill level. When people come to see you, you understand that they're at an acceptable skill level, and then you can evaluate to a certain extent through the data. But in reality, it's you sort of have to mesh the two, right? When's the last time you've been in a right seat for somebody?
Oh, it's been a while. It's been a good while. And part of the thing about right seat is a really good right seat instructor will understand that the driver has a finite amount of attention to give them, because their primary responsibility is driving that car around that track safely, as quickly as they can, or as quickly as they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I felt, people have said to me before, they said, I need an in-car instructor because I need somebody that I can ride with, who will show me what the car can do, or I need somebody that can give me feedback right away. And I'm sitting there saying, if you're doing all this stuff on the fly with somebody in the passenger seat, that means you probably haven't gone out on track with a very clear vision of what you want to do. And I think some of the best in-car instructors I know distill it to 1 or 2 objectives each session, and then work on a section of the track, a particular skill execution, a particular area on track, and say, look, I don't care what you do around the rest of the circuit. We're working on the turn 5, turn 6 transition at Summit, which is one of the most critical right-hand turns, turn 6 into the carousel, of any corner on the track. It is super easy to overslow there. It's super easy to turn in early. It's super easy to screw your carousel exit by being greedy early on instead of building speed throughout. And, an in-car instructor is going to be able to say, hey, you're charging the first portion of this carousel. Me looking at the data with the person that I'm with after the session, we will come up with the same thing. But an in-car instructor, if that person doesn't already know that and is trying to get better at that particular execution, the in-car instructor can certainly can bootstrap people much quicker than somebody outside the car. However, when we start talking about advanced technique and we talk about unsticking the car, because cars do handle differently without a right seat passenger. And some of it, some of the performance differential can be significant. And people who do TT and club race, they don't have the ability to put somebody in the passenger seat. But DE, people are coming through HPDE 1, HPDE 2, HPDE 3, HPDE 4. They're soloing in the upper groups, obviously. Their conversations can be much deeper with a coach outside of the car, and you can explore aspects and attitudes of the car in the car's approach to an apex much more deeply when you're both sitting in front of a 27-inch monitor and saying, I want you to delay your turn in a beat or more. And the driver will go out with that specific idea, and they will delay that turn in just a little bit. Then they'll do the turn in that they were already doing into turn 7, which is the end of the carousel at Summit. And all of a sudden, bang, the car is on the right half of the road with the right side of the car parallel with the right side of the track after the worker station. All of a sudden, the car is relaxed before it turns left. It's not hurried. It's not a jam. People feel in control. And when they feel comfortable and confident, they're using more percentage throttle application than they would if they're not comfortable. And all of a sudden, they're building speed through turn 8, the left, and then building more speed through turn right. And then they arrive at turn 10 going faster than they've ever gone. So there's definitely ways to skin a cat for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Everybody, I think in DE, everybody, especially at VIR, they're like, I can take the S's flat. And I had a friend of mine. He's a driving mentor of mine also. My rookie year, I had a passenger seat in my car. So it was a Friday practice day. So he jumped in the car and he goes, yeah, you're flat up the S's, but you're also slow. Just because you're flat doesn't mean you're actually going up there fast. So he looked at data and he said, you're turning in too late and you're not getting the turning in too late and too slow. It was lollygagging up there. I was being lazy with my steering wheel going up the S's. My foot was all the way to the floor, but what it did, it allowed things to, it allowed the curbing to slow me down, right? Because I was also lateral G'ing and trying to climb at the same time. Yep. Then you hit the rumble strips, and that 1 mile an hour I was losing by hitting the curb. When I had everything straight, I didn't lose that mile an hour, and things were vastly different getting up the S's. So
that's cool.
There's always something to learn. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us explaining the different ways to look at data, the different systems. Is there any of your contact info you want to share with us this evening? Ways to get in touch with you? You're on
best
Instagram,
way to get in touch with me, and the best way to
you're on Instagram, but only
check out is
but only 3 posts.
And I would say the best. I need to fix that.
Yeah.
But technically, the peterkrause.net site and the gofasternow.com is the best way to reach me.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
I feel like I'm going to have to reach out to you within the next 12 months. So I need to see what I can get the car to do. I need to see what I can see in my data, what's left for me, but really to be reevaluated and maybe reevaluate how I should be looking at my data. So,
well, and I think you've hit the nail right on the head. It is something that I think most drivers can benefit from past a certain point. I also think that there are a lot of good people that are doing it. I'm fortunate to have done it since before it was a thing. I have worked with current NASCAR drivers. I've worked with Le Mans winners, Daytona 24-hour winners, Sebring 12-hour winners. I've seen the best drivers in action and examined their data exhaustively with them. I have found time for an ex-world driving champion in a car that he was driving that he was unfamiliar with at a circuit that he had driven a Indy car on the last time he was there, and that was Le Circuit Mont Tremblant in Canada. And again, it was not that I was a quicker driver than this world driving champion, this F1 champion. It was that we were looking at the data, and I suggested to his crew chief, I said, look, I think if he slows a little earlier and gets back to power a little sooner, the platform will be more stable, he will be more comfortable, and he'll spend less time in that sector. And this driving champion came down the steps from the motorhome at that moment, and the crew chief said, hey, you might want to listen to this. And the driving champion said, you got 5 minutes. And so I did my little elevator speech, and he went out and did 1.2 seconds quicker than he had the session before. And we looked at the data, and he did exactly what we both decided together was the next step. And I know that if it works for him, it'll work for you, and it'll work for anybody. I mean, that's got to be one of the things on my website. Ross Bentley has been kind enough to say a lot of nice things about me, and he's seen me in action, and we've worked together quite a bit. But it's really all about distilling it and making it simple, and trying to limit our goals for a particular session to one or two things. And I use the data, and I try to assist the person that I'm working with to use the data to distill a bunch of information into one or two goals and objectives for the next session. And then we measure when they come back in. Data is not a tattletale, it's a tool. And it's just one tool in data by itself will not make a driver quicker. The driver has to do that. They push the pedals, they turn the wheel. A coach is not going to make a driver quicker. But
Correct.
Together, they can come up with a plan that allows that.
Yeah. You have to.
I thank you very much for having me on
Thank you,
podcast.
sir. I really appreciate it. It's good talking to you this evening.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.